Yod, the grabbing hand. Part 10 of this study of Ezekiel. So if we say, okay, Yahusha is going to come down here similar to man, Ben Adam, and he's going to show or say, he's only going to say the things, he says, I am only saying what I hear my Father saying, and I'm only doing what I see my Father doing. Where did he get that perspective? Did Yahusha have memory of being in the heavens? Right there with Elohim. If that's where he was, if that's where he came from. And I know some people doubt or question or have theories or doctrines about this, so I'm leaving it speculative. Did Yahusha come from the heavens of being with Elohim right by his side? If he was then born of the Virgin and became a human walking the face of the earth, became an Adam walking the face of the earth, did he have memory of that occasion? If so, he's not Ben Adam. He's not like us because we got no memory of such things. We're down here struggling in ignorant darkness, illiteracy. Whatever language we learned, took a few years to learn it, and we still don't really know the truth. So that's what I mean by illiterate, especially if the Hebrew is the truth and we were never taught Hebrew, then we're still illiterate no matter how many languages we know, because we're all babble. But if he remembers, then he's not Ben Adam. So if he's going to be Ben Adam, if he's going to be according to our understanding, according to our likeness, in the image of man, then he can't remember anything from before he was birthed. Well, then that means that for him to say, I only do the things I hear my Father, I only say the things I hear my Father saying, I only do the things I see my Father doing. The only way he could have got that, there's only two ways. One, he had to have this Holy Spirit divine experience where the Holy Spirit's leading him, guiding him, directing him, telling him, revealing to him, which might have been the case. Like people have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, which I can't say, no, you didn't. I don't understand whatever their experience is, but I certainly can't deny it. Or he just read the scripture, read the Torah, and said, he's told us right here, I'm just doing what I see him telling us to do. Well, now that's Ben Adam. That's a common experience with us. He gave us his words. It gave us record. Moshe, write down all these words. Okay, he gave us the record of his voice telling his people what to do, what to believe, how to trust. Okay? So for if Yahusha simply said, I'm just reading the same words you guys are reading. I'm not making stuff up. I'm not coming up with some other religion. I'm not running a cult. I'm just looking at what we were told by Yahuwah's own voice. Well, then he's in the same level playing field with the rest of us. And for him to say, hey, whatever you see me doing is not because I'm some God man. He says, I'm doing the same thing you guys should be doing, and you will be doing, and even greater. What? Walking on the water? Transfiguring with Moshe and Elijah, or producing food, not just manna, but bread and fish, oil? What? Raising the dead, healing the sick? If he wasn't doing that because he was the God man, but he was just Ben Adam, then that means if we had the same perspective, we ought to be. We coulda, woulda, shoulda, and will be doing those things. Why are we not? Somehow we're not hearing what he said, believing what he said, or doing what he said. So there's these phrases where there's one place here in the later part of Ezekiel 20, as well as some other verses where it says, the days are coming when it'll even be better than it was at the beginning. Better? Well, better than what? In the beginning, with Moshe taking the people out of Egypt, they were so rebellious, only 2 of them made it in. Not even Moshe and Aaron, but it was Joshua and Caleb made it into the promised land. And we read how Elohim was going to kill them all. So to say it's going to be better at the beginning, that's not hard to beat. 3 guys instead of only 2. That's better than it was at the beginning. Or did he mean the days of David? Well, the days of David and Solomon were known as the golden era, the golden years. King Saul, I could look at it like King Saul was the first king, but he didn't measure up. David measured up, and he gave it to his son Solomon, and Solomon kind of dropped it. So the pinnacle was right there, almost like between David and Solomon, right at that either side of the transition between David being king, because the first 20 years or so of David being king, he was on the run. He was a hunted man, bounty on his head. He wasn't king in supremacy at first. So the days of his supremacy and the beginning years of Solomon's reign and his supremacy, that was like the golden era. And it said gold and silver were more plentiful in Jerusalem than sticks and stones. What? Where'd he get all that? Land of Ophir, and he had ships that went around the world, and it's like, what was going on? And if there's a promise that Elohim is going to restore his favor to his people, question is on what condition, but if he's going to do that, then it's got to be better than those days, because that was the beginning of the kingdom. David unified the 12 tribes. Before David, Samuel was the resident prophet. Saul was the king, but he was having trouble holding people together. Saul had a certain battle, and there was 2 swords in the entire army. There was the entire Israeli army. I think they said there was 600 men, and there was 2 swords. The rest of them, they had sticks and stones. And the enemy was so numerous, they filled the valley. Let's say there was probably 600,000, maybe more, maybe 1 million guys. I mean, there was a huge army armed to the teeth, and Saul and his son Jonathan were the only 2 guys that had a sword. Back in those days, the other nations were ruling over Israel, and they didn't have the metallurgy. They didn't have the forges. They didn't have the resources, whether it was copper, bronze, iron, just didn't have them. Of course, what Elohim did was he didn't just arbitrarily see if Mishpat is the foundation of Yahuwah's throne. He can't just say, okay, I'm tired of these guys, I'm going to throw some lightning bolts at them. That's not the way it works. What he does is he brings their own way on their own head. So all these guys, all these neighboring armies that were ravaging Israel, camped out in this valley, filling the valley full, having some sort of big party. All of a sudden, something happened. This is the occasion where Jonathan and his armor bearer went up to the top of this hill, this garrison, and the 2 of them took out like 20 guys, and then this panic. It almost describes it like rolling down the hill, like pushing a boulder and seeing it roll down. And as soon as it hit the camp, this panic swept into the camp. This invisible wave ripple effect, like this oscillation thing, hit the camp, and the camp went into a furor, and they all started killing each other. Oh, the whole enemy started killing each other. And Saul was like, what's going on? Who's not here? Jonathan, your son. What's he doing? What just happened? Elohim brought the ways of the enemy upon their own head, like an avalanche. They killed each other, and then Saul and his 600 guys, let's get to it. They picked up and they ran in there, and they picked up all the all the stuff, all the weaponry and all the food and provisions. And it's like, and chased down the stragglers and took them out. And it's like Elohim used, think of this. That was let's just say it was a raiding party. Similar thing happened with Abraham. 5 kings came against the land of Sodom and Gomorrah back before it, years later, it was hit with fire and brimstone and burned it all up. But back in the days before, when Abraham was hanging around and Lot was living there, Sodom and Gomorrah, and that whole valley was like the Garden of Eden. It was lush, and they had incredible commerce and wealth there, animals and objects and resources. And so these 5 kings, and I can't remember the number, it was either 80,000 or 800,000. I think it was 800,000 men in their army. They swooped in and raided and took all these people captive, ravaged the land, and they went away. And Abraham picked up 300 of his friends and attacked them and prevailed. Abraham with 300 took out 800,000. And that's the occasion with Melchizedek. And anyway, right after that. But what I'm saying is this incredible defeat of Israel's enemies, not at necessarily the hand of Israel, of course, it was at the hand of Abraham, but because Yahweh our Elohim returns a man's way upon his own head. If you do justice, if you do righteousness, you get deliverance and victory. That's justice. That's mishpat. That's balancing of scales. And somehow we have to understand that that's just the way this place is built. So whatever we think of Elohim, whatever we imagine him to do, he will do similarly. If we think he's a big stupid jerk, he's going to act like a big stupid jerk. If we think he's our Elohim who loves us with incredible favor, he will be our Elohim who loves us with incredible favor. He will do similarly. Well, wait a minute, that's Ben Adam, right? According to how we understand, he will do similarly. That's Ben Adam. That's son of man. It's translated son of man, but it actually, what Ben Adam means is, I'm similar. I'm similar to what? So if you go back and you look at the relationship that Israel has had famously throughout the Old Testament, throughout the Tanakh, Israel has done basically 4 things. Okay, so the last 2 weeks, I've talked about Ezekiel 20. And just this week, the other day, I hope you got it, Kurt, what I did is I wrote up the entire chapter, 44 verses, in the book here, where the paleo letters are in the red, and I just wrote the definitions of the words under them, and the analysis really isn't there. The analysis is what we're talking about, but word for word, it's written there. And perhaps we can even talk about this again next week. But what I'm saying is that that's a lot. There's 44, I think there's like 10 pages, and there's 44 verses. So what I did on this, as I tried to reduce it down to where it's comprehensible. So that's what I'm going to go through now. So why am I saying all this stuff? If it starts off saying, son of man, if he starts off saying the date is 7/5/10, my identity, I will do similarly. As you think I am, so I will be to you. Is that what this is about? In which case, if Yeshua goes into the grave, and at the letters, he was put to the letter Zion, the 7th letter, Hey Vav Zion, behold this man put to the weapon, slain, thrown into the Chet, the tomb, the round rock, Tet rolled in front of it. He says, I do this by my own hand. That's Yod, this is he's doing this, and then what? Kaf Lamed, Mem Nun, Samak Ayin Pei. So what's in Samak Ayin Pei? Well, Samak Ayin, or Nun Samak Ayin, means to escape, to be hidden, to be rescued, to be delivered, saved, to disappear. Somebody's looking for you and they can't find you. To be camouflaged. He came in disguise, Bet Gimel Dalet. If Israel's in him, he promises his people Nun Samak Ayin, which is the same type of thing, synonym with Bet Gimel Dalet. But what do we have to do? Ayin pei is the word for bird or to put out a wing. Oof, ayin vav pei. To branch out is samik ayin pei, or nun samik ayin is to, it's like a menorah. There's a place where it starts, it puts out a trunk like a tree and then puts out branches. To branch like a manifold, or to diversify, to variegate. Well, that's like the denominations. That's like the tribes. For him to say, I'm going to bring you into the wilderness of the nations and make you pass under the rod, the word there for rod is shin petet, which is tribe, tribal. Is he saying, I'm going to branch you into tribes again? So if we think, oh no, we should all just be one. If you come back to the Torah, you're a Jew. And if you're not, you're a Christian, and there's all these stupid Protestant denominations, and it's like, they're not stupid denominations. It's the word to branch, to diversify. It's like the 12 stones on the chosen, the breastplate of the high priest. And there's something about that is his design, his pattern. The 22 letters, which one is the best letter? That must be the Aleph, must be the top. No, they're all equal. There's something about the 22 which is more important than a singular one. There's something about the branching out, diversifying, which is a beautiful thing to him. Like having siblings in a family. So the idea to take these verses and to look at them, so I'll see how quick I can go through this, just to bring up, I've tried to look at saying, what is the key point of every one of these verses? If I could reduce each verse down to just a small little statement, how could I then read Ezekiel 20? So that's what I'm going to try to do here. So the first verse has to do with the word Zayin Hey Yod, my identity. The second verse, exist, Yehi, Debar Yahweh Ali, saying, well, Alef Lamed Yod. Well, what does that mean? When we were talking about the word Elia being translated Elijah, that was Alef Lamed Yod Hei. Well, Aleph, if that's the letter that means ox, well, there's an ox. What do you do with the ox? But if Aleph is the letter that means first person, self-referential, of identity and intent. See, so the value that I give each letter as I go to now decompose, reverse engineer, decipher, decode the spelling of every word is critical. So you for yourself would have to come to an understanding of the reason why the orthography or the pictographic value of every letter is what I'm claiming it is. And I could explain the reason. I think we've done that. We could do it again if there's any question by anybody. But there's a reason. It's not just whimsical. It's not arbitrary. It's not just Aleph looks like the head of an ox, so let's just pretend Aleph means head of an ox. Aleph does mean ox, but Aleph also means 1,000. It also means one. So one, like an ox, equal to 10,000, or 1,000 like a, how many horsepower is that engine? It's what engine, but if it's 400 horsepower, then you could have 400 horses. Well, could you have 1,000 men, the equivalent power of one ox? Is that what Aleph is saying? Something like that. But Alef Lamed Yod, see, Lamed Yod is a word that means mine. I own it. Ani ladodi vedodi li. That last word li, Lamed Yod, is spelled right here. Alef Lamed Yod. Then this is, Aleph is mine. Or is he saying, I'm the guy who gets to decide what the Aleph is? Or this is my Aleph. The word spelled Alef Lamed can either mean motion toward, like going a certain direction, like shooting an arrow. I am launching this ship. I am masterminding this program, but it can also mean negative, as if I have the authority of when to let it go and when to pull it back. So Alef Lamed is both directions. Lamed Aleph is the word that means no, which is to say stop, it ain't moving. But see, that's the reverse spelling order. So if you're just looking at the meanings of words, whether it's Lamed or Aleph or Alef Lamed, if the only two components of this, call it like a molecule, are the same, whether you flip hydrogen and oxygen or oxygen and hydrogen, it's still water. So how do you know the spelling of words? So the order that the letters are spelled in then makes a difference that you have to wrap your mind around. And there's some words and sentences I've tried to indicate in other studies of reading the sentence forward and then reading the sentence backwards. We'll look at the spelling of the words this way and then that way, because there's a merit, there's a value, there's something to each way of doing these things. And sometimes I wrap these all up and it's hard, unless you know what I'm doing, you don't know what I'm doing. But I've found that there's a value in doing it. So I'm just trying to make it known so that people can do it on their own. So the verse 2 says, Vayehi debar Yahweh. And it came to be Yehi or. Well, that's the same word as let there be light. Vayehi erev, Vayehi boker, Yom echad. Hey, there came to be evening, there came to be morning, day one. There came to be. That's almost like in the future looking at telling a story about the past. But Yehi, if it means to exist, is that just simply existing? Is that just always present tense? What is it? Is it looking at the past? Is it let there be, as if that was projecting into the future? So you'll see three different ways for that word to be interpreted. If I think it just has to do with existing, it is. Does he live in time? No, he's out of time. Time is part of the universe that we're put into. So this is outside of time. Exist debar Yahweh. The word debar, as we talked last week, is not just word to speak, but it also means pasture, plague, the raft pulled behind, that which is coming. But it also means stipulations. So I could look at that verse and say, Vayhi debar Yahweh, the word of Yahweh just came to me. It's like, oh, all of a sudden I just had this voice speaking in my head or this message on my heart. Or I could read that as saying, the debar of Yahuwah exists. That's the reality. Okay. And then the word Ali means the things that are possessed as the personal property of Aleph, the one who set this whole thing up. La Amer, saying, but Lamed means unto. Amer is a declaration. Like the Declaration of Independence in America, this is a major statement that we're all going to be behind and we're all going to live or die according to it. So Amer is not just the word that means to say. The word debar can mean to say. The word debar can mean speak. The word Amer can mean speak. But I see Amer, and also you look at the dictionary and fine high utterances, almost like the antlers of an elk just fly to take flight. It's like, this is a majestic declaration from the emperor. One way to look at it. Like antlers of an elk. The debar of Yahweh is statements of truth based on what's in this 22-letter Aleph-Beit that are the elements, like the periodic table of every molecule, every composite, which are then like the spellings of words to equate chemistry to language. Everything that exists as a declaration of truth is. And it's stipulated in the debar of Yahuwah, and very specifically, as we've been talking about, it's what he said to Israel. Not everybody else, not to Goyim, but to Israel. And he said that he was going to use Israel as the model for his identity. Yeshua is not just the model of his identity, though it is. The Aleph-Beit is also a model of his identity, but he was going to use the way he deals with Israel as the model of his identity. So he says to Israel from the very beginning, this is the debar, you walk in my ways, you listen to my voice, you do what I say, and you get incredibly blessed. But if you betray me, if you act treacherously, Bet Gimel Dalet, you look one way, but you're really something else, camouflage. You have the pretense of worship, like the elders of Israel that we're talking about here, but you're worshiping Elohim Achrim, then you're getting the curse, the plague, all hell's going to bust loose on you. And you empower your enemies because I can't do anything about it, because that's the terms of the contract. There's one verse here we'll get to. He said, hey, don't look at me. I'm not making this happen. You're making it happen, Israel. The terms of the contract are carved in stone. The terms of the stipulations of the Debar say that your way comes back on your own head. Now, I'm going to give you certain commandments. And if you walk in these commandments, you get blessed. Everything happens. But to the degree that you don't walk in my commandments, and the word command there is chet kuf, chok. Chet vav kuf is the word for a rung on a ladder. So you could think of the commandments like rungs on a ladder, but he's going to tell us to do a bunch of things. If we do those things, we get incredibly blessed, more blessed than any other people on the face of the earth ever. David figured it out. David was running the nation accordingly, and he got the benefits. He handed it to his son Solomon. Solomon brought in all these other women with all their other cultures and all their other deities, and built temples for them to keep them happier as museums of their culture, and the whole thing went down. And it's been down up until now. It's been down, meaning we haven't achieved the height of the promise, the elevation, meaning promotion and success and raised to a higher dignity, words that are used in this chapter to describe what's in front of us. So if we say, oh man, did you hear what they were doing in Israel yesterday? They were Hamas, which is a Hebrew word, chet mem samik, which means violence. Hamas, it's a Hebrew word. Well, they launched like 2,500 missiles into the Eretz, into the land of Israel. And it's like, well, who's the good guys and who's the bad guys? Shut up, man. You can't ask that question. You know darn well the Israelis are the good guys, and Hamas, because they say violence, are the bad guys. No, wait a minute. Didn't Abraham do violence against the 5 kings who did violence against Sodom and Gomorrah? Who's good and who's bad? Didn't David do violence against his neighbors? Was that good or bad? Gosh, didn't Yahusha do violence when he picked up the scourge and whipped the guys who were doing money changing in the temple? Well, who's good and who's bad? For me to even question, I don't know who's good and who's bad. I had a friend kind of, what? You can't, you shut. It's like, whoa, what's good and what's bad? I don't know what's going on. All I can figure is, what did he tell us to do? I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's a psyop. I don't know if it's a false flag. I don't know if it's song and dance, smoke and mirrors, shock and awe. I don't know what's going on. And the people are doing all that stuff. False flag, song and dance, smoke and mirrors, shock and awe. What do those things mean? If you look at the next verse, say to the elders of Israel that basically Shin Pei Tet, but I have that excuse me, verse 4 was Shin Pei Tet. It says that's the balanced scales. It says Hey Tav Shin Pei Tet, Aleph Tav Mem, Hey Tav Shin Pei Vav Tet. Well, what does that mean? That means with the way you guys, he's talking to the elders of Israel, with the way you guys are doing things, you're putting it in your side of the scales of balance, and guess what? It's what's coming back on you. So it's like, wait a minute, who's running the show over in Israel? Well, who's running the show in Washington, D.C., or London, or Rome? Those 3 cities in particular, if you know what's going on. And it's like, he's going to bring their own way back on them, because that's the way it works. I will similarly. Ben Adam, right? Mishpat, your own way back on your own head. What, me? What am I doing? And he says to the elders of Israel, oh, you came, see the word drosh, as we mentioned last week, it means to seek, to study. We're doing Bible study. We came here to inquire of Elohim. But it also, in the dictionary, means to study as an act of worship. So to say, oh, yes, we're doing Bible study as an act of worship. Well, what's an act of worship? And there's other places you can see, why do people worship? To get his attention. In other words, another thing we said last week was, hey, this whole study of Isaiah 58, hey, we fasted and you don't even pay any attention? Do we do it for nothing? Hey, we sang some worship songs. Didn't it tickle your ear? I remember there's a certain worship song we used to sing that, may it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear. Well, may it be. But he told us what would be a sweet sound. And that would be for us to listen to his voice and recall his words back to him and say, this is what you said, right? Can we take you up? Can we take you according to your word? That's a sweet sound to him. So the elders of Israel were doing some funny business, and they were saying, hey, come to Ezekiel and say, hey, could you like find out why he's not listening to us? And it's like, because it's your own way back on you. And then for Yahuwah to say, as I live, I'm not going to be inquired of by you. I'm not going to respond to your yanking my chain saying, hey, we worshiped. Hey, we studied, we fasted, and you owe us. It doesn't work that way. Maybe it does in their doctrine, but that's not the way it works. So verse 4 basically is shofet, measured back to you. Verse 5, he said, I lift up my hand and I swear. It's like, now what does he mean by that? When he says, I lifted up my hand and I swear as I live, we have to realize he has a reality that when he says something, okay, that's it. That is the reality. When he says it twice, that's really the reality. And when he lifts his hand and says it, that's really, really, really is the reality. It's all the same. It's like, how much faith do we need? Size of a grain of mustard seed. It's either there or it's not. It's like a dot. It's either there or it's not, one-dimensional. Either you know him or you don't. Either you believe him or you don't. Either you have faith or you don't. We need more faith. What did he say? It's either true or it's not. So for somebody to say, well, he said it, but he meant something else, like I was saying that I heard on the radio, it's like, that's not true then. He didn't mean something else. He said what he said. That's what it is. So we have to make our consciousness equal to his consciousness. That's what Yahushua was doing. Whatever I heard my father say, that's what I'm saying. Whatever I see him doing, not because I'm up in heaven seeing him, but because he's telling us what he's doing right here in his words. Okay, then that's what he's doing. Pretty simple, pretty matter of fact. Verse 6, he said he went and checked out the whole earth and he found the land flowing with milk and honey. Well, the interesting thing about that, verse 6, is that the word to flow is actually spelled Zion Bet. But this word is Zion Kaf Tav. And if you look at the word in the dictionary for Zion Kaf, it means pure, clean, innocent, acquitted, granted a right or a title. It's an advance or a privilege of great favor. But I thought it was flowing with milk and honey. Well, that's the word they translated flowing. What's the word milk? Chet Lamed Bet, chalav. And honey is dabash. Look a little closer at that. Chet Lamed Chal, well, that's the word for common or profane. Chet Lamed is also the word for rusty, but it's also the word for sweet. It's also the word where you get challah bread, challah bread. So the exact same word that means sweet and pleasant is rusty and vile. Because each word, not every time, but a lot of times in the dictionary, you'll see each word is both sides. So is Chet Lamed, Lamed is profane, but Chet Lamed here, well, what's Lamed Bet? That's the word for heart. So I could say the word translated milk is actually sweetheart. Sweetheart. A pure, clean, innocent, given a privilege of favor and advantage to his sweetheart. And then the word for honey, dalet bet shin. Well, dalet bet is the word for bear, B-E-A-R, but it's also to walk softly or to whisper. So it's this powerful but whispering. And bet shin, well, bet vav shin means shamed or to drive gently. Like a whisper, a powerful but yet whisper, like the still small voice that Elijah heard when he's in that cave. Not the earthquake, not the fire, but the powerful but still small voice. So that's what the words milk and honey are composed of. And then the words Zadi bet Yod. Well, like Yahweh's Zavot. Zadi bet Aleph Tav. So Zadi is this concept of resurrection, of blossoming, and bet is to put the Aleph idea plan into a noun, to take the formless and void plan and make it the universe. Bet, boom, there it is. Physical composition. But yet, even physicists will tell you today that if we step back and look and we see the universe, there's the trees, the bugs, the animals, the human, the man, the stars, the waters. But if you look at anything that exists with a microscope, the stronger the microscope, you realize there's nothing there. It's just positive and negative oscillations of electrical current. And that, like an electron around a neutron, like a planet in the orbit of the sun model of the galaxy, of the solar system, there's way more space of nothing in between the objects, the things that we think of as solid objects, being a charge of electricity in the electron compared to the positive charge of the proton. It's mostly empty space. So any object, even wood, is mostly empty space. But he causes it to exist. That's Zadi bet Yod, beautifully flourish. Solid, true. And then Hey Yod Aleph, it exists of all the land. So he, regardless of what the land over there looks like, or whether it's Africa or America or whatever, he found the very, very, very best place. He says, here, sweetheart, I'm giving it to you. Verse 7, but his people declared him man shin kuf vav zadi. Well, kuf vav zadi, kutz. Kuf zadi means wake up, but kuf zadi is a thorn, or to throw thorns in somebody's path. So for him to say in Daniel 12, hey, hide the words and seal the book until the time of the end. The end is spelled kuf zadi. What does that mean? Well, time of the awakening. Wake up. Yod kuf zadi. Wake up. Hey, wake up. It's time to get to work. Or wake up, there's something about to happen. Or wake up, look at your enemy has thrown thorns in your path. Or they've dug a pit for you to fall in. Or they've been lying to you and you're about to be in big trouble if you don't wake up and do something about it. But it also means detestable and reptilian, like a swarm of reptiles, or like a pit full of snakes and scorpions. The hooked tail of the scorpion and the snakes writhing, and that's your kutz. In the eyes of the Shin Lamed Yod Kaf, well, Shin Lamed Yod Kaf means quiet, tranquility, negligent, or careless. So it's almost like Yahweh's people were given the truth of his stuff, and carelessly, negligently, they took it for granted, and it was turned into a lie. It was turned into a booby trap. Begaluli, of idols. Mitzrayim, of Egypt. But Egypt also is the word for oppression and dire straits, or between a straight rock and a hard place. Toward Tav Tet Mem Aleph Av, which is unclean, defiled, impure. Tet Mem Mem is stopped up. Tet Mem Nun is hidden or concealed. So something deceptive, something as an act of treacherously deceived us, thinking it was good, but it was actually impure, thinking it was worshiping him, but it was actually an idol, thinking it was our freedom, but it was actually an oppression of Egypt, of Mitzrayim. And then he goes on to say, I am Yahweh your Elohim. Hello? Do you not know the difference between Yahweh your Elohim and whoever that other deity is that you think you're worshiping? How would you know the difference? Zayin Hey Yod, I'm distinctively different. I'm the set apart one. And so like what I was saying, the letter Zion means to be cut off, like the Sabbath day is cut off. And you say, well, seventh day, first day, it's whatever day of the week. Like what, that other person was saying a few weeks ago, well, I'll take as my worship day, whatever day is convenient with my work schedule. And I heard somebody say a little while ago, well, Passover this year, or it was a number of years ago, Passover falls on an inconvenient day of the week. So we're going to celebrate Passover on the weekend when everybody can do it. Yeah, okay. That's not Kadosh. That's a common day that you're doing out of your convenience. He says in another place coming up, he says, you go to these high places to worship, but you're the only one going there. What is a high place? Bima. Oh, it's a Ram, it's a Ayin Lamed, it's Mem Ayin Lamed, a place to offer your sacrifices, the interesting trees and the high hills. And he says, but you're the only one coming there. He's not going there. And there's another verse elsewhere. It says, can a man make for himself Elohim? Can you make for yourselves holy days? They're not holy. Can you make for yourself gods? They're not gods. Can you make for yourself a sacred place if you're the only one going there and he doesn't show up? It's not sacred. It's just something in your own imagination, a fairy tale. And yet you feel good. I remember as a kid something special about Christmas Day. I remember even in high school that Christmas Day, I could feel it was a different day. And I'd want to call my friends just to talk to them. Hey, it's Christmas Day. It didn't really exist. It was all a figment of my imagination. I know that now. Back then, it was no figment. It was a reality. I knew somehow there was something just different about Christmas Day. I felt it. I knew it. I could almost taste it. It was a special day. It was the most special day of the year. Only it's not. But my personal relationship with my Lord and Savior, by golly, it sure was. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe I just invented that. Gosh. How easily can Adam be duped? It's shiny. That word nachash in the garden, the nachash said, hey, doesn't it look like a pretty nice piece of fruit? The word nachash can mean shiny. So like we're bamboozled by shiny things. From what I understand, the Native Americans living in what's now Manhattan, New York, sold that whole peninsula for a bag of buttons and trinkets and beads. Hey, look, we've never seen these things before. We can't make these. Where'd you get them? Boy, shiny little trinkets of buttons and beads. Wow. What's a treasure to one is garbage to another. And it's like, well, where's the real treasure? The real segula. Israel is Yahweh's segula. Is Yahweh Israel's segula? Is understanding the meaning of each one of these letters our segula? Precious, dear treasure? So, verse 7, the main thing is the word for idol is like Yahweh's stuff to his people, Israel, is a thorn of a detestable swarming thing. They'd rather go for idols. The word for Shin Kuf Zadi also means a sickening dread. Like waking up in the middle of the night and hearing 2,500 rockets exploding in your neighborhood. A sickening dread, feeling the shaking of the explosions of what was just happening over there. To find out that they've been giving you food laced with toxins which will cause cancer, or giving you medicinal benefits which cause cancerous tumors and robotic structures to start growing inside you. You know, that kind of thing. That's what these words mean, shakutz. Verse 8, and he said, my people have no desire to hear Alef Lamed Yod, which would be considered, if Lamed Yod means mine, and if Aleph is the stuff that's his, then I could read Alef Lamed Yod is my stuff. That's in verse 8. It was also up there in verse 2. My people have no desire for my stuff. Well, why do you think for 2,000 years at the Council of Nicaea in 321 or 325 AD, Saint Constantine, the Roman emperor, he later became known as the saint, he made the empire decree that said, well, nothing more to do with the detestable practices of the Jews. Anybody who gets caught trying to keep the Sabbath day gets killed, tortured and killed. All their stuff of their life stolen from them. So you have no inheritance to give to your children. It's all given to the state and given to everybody else. So you get robbed, tortured, and killed if you try to keep the Sabbath day or keep any of the Moedim or speak Hebrew or even mention that detestable God's name spelled with the letters Yod Hei Vav Hei. Yahweh took it all away from his people. For us to have these things is an incredible fortune to us. Do we even know? Do we even care? But in verse 8, Yahweh is saying, in this, he says, the idols of Egypt, you just won't let it go. He could tell us that his Moedim are the sacred times of his appointed meetings, Mikra Kodesh. These are the days. Now the question is, how do you figure out the right calendar? But to say, we're just going to choose the weekend because it's convenient, that's not the right calendar under any pretense. But to say, well, I don't know if it's this month or that month, the Jews declare it now, but it looked like springtime to us here, so I'm going to go from the appearance of the Aviv or the barley. Was it found in the... There's different reasons, but to not even care. But to say, but we're still going to do the secular holidays blended with pagan rituals that's coming up in December and October and January. It's like, why? Because we just don't want to let them go. Well, that's what he's talking about in verse 8. But then in verse 9, he talks about for the benefit of the Goyim, knowing him. And again, the word Goy, Gimel Vav Yod, plural, ending in Yod Mem, Goy, Goyim, but Haggah would be the root word. And the idea that Haggah means navigate by the phonetic spelling of words, means that the Goyim are the other nations that have different languages that navigate differently. And the way he relates to Israel, he wants to have Israel put him on display in recognition for his true identity. And so therefore, regardless of any job, any role, any purpose, anything that any other nation or any other culture might be about, and I'm not putting any condemnation or judgment on them, but on Israel, their job, their duty, their reason for being is to display the ornamentation of the truth of Yahuwah's identity. Israel's job is to be Yahuwah's tafarta, his headdress, his grandeur on display. So Israel has no excuse for keeping any other sacred days other than the Moedim of Leviticus 23, the Sabbath day and the Moedim, period. And you could say, well, USA, Rome, Britain, any other nation can keep all the pagan festivals they want and call them Christian, or they could call them Hindu, or they can call them anything, and it doesn't matter. It's not about them. It's not about that. This is about Israel. So now you have to decide, do you want to be Israel? If you want to be Israel, you got to decide whether you want to dress up looking like the dead on the 31st of October. Go ahead if you want to, but why? Why are you doing that? Are you choosing life? Are you displaying the Elohim Chaim, the Elohim of life, the covenant of life between Yahweh's Avot and Israel? Is that what you're putting on display? And if not, why not? How do you do that? How do you get rid of the idols, the detestable idols that in your eyes, that not only will produce a sickening dread when you're walking in the forest alone, or when you're in your house and you hear something go bump at night, or you see some sort of apparition in your own room, which I've heard numerous people say have had happen, though they may not exist, but maybe they do. The point is, when you get some sort of cancer within you, and yet you've been eating God-blessed pork at your holidays, ham, Christmas and Easter, what? For the benefit of the goyim knowing me, Zadi Yod Aleph, he's going to publish what he does to Israel. So when Israel betrays him, he's going to tear the bejeebers out of them, destroying them, just ravaging them with pillage and plague and mutilation. But yet when Israel walks in his ways, he turns and pours out his favor. Verse 10, he says, I exported them from Egypt and imported the Hebrews into the wilderness. But the word wilderness is spelled bet mem dalet bet resh, ba me dabar. Well, dabar, that's the word for stipulations and words. He took them to the mem dabar, to the place of words. So he took them out of the straits of oppression and brought them to the place of words. But it's translated that he took them out of Egypt and brought them into the wilderness. But the word wilderness literally means the place of words. But not only wilderness, dabar also means either plague and or pasture. I brought them to the pasture of the place of words. So the studying of this language, at least in my experience, to me, what I'm trying to make apprehensible is that it's the pasture of Yahuwah's feeding his sheep with his words, which are the stuff of his heart. Verse 11, it starts off with the word Aleph Tav Nun, which is tonic, which is to regain strength. So he gives chok, the commands for the balancing of scales. You put this, you do this. I've given you my instructions. So this is the way the universe has worked. I'm going to tell you to do something, and when you do it, that's called righteousness, because you're doing what I said, and you put it on your side of the scale of balance, and then you get the victory. See how easy that is? It's like pretty simple. So I made known to them my oath, Aleph Tav Mem. Tav Mem would be to make known to them my Aleph Tav, pronounced oath or oath, which is also a letter of the alphabet. So it's a sign or a symbol that means something. Each one of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet then is a symbol of something, which is Yahuwah's oath that he rose his hand, swore to. This is the way it works. This is the way it's going to be. I'm going to tell you to do something. You do it, and you get victory and deliverance and salvation. Yeah, but what about believing in JC in his dying on the cross? That's not even addressed. It's not denying it. It's not affirming it. It's not even addressing it. So when you see in these other verses, and I think it's in Ezekiel 38, where he says, when the wicked man does wickedness, he's going to die. That's the way it works. He's going to die. The wicked man does wickedness, he dies. But if he changes his ways of wickedness and starts doing righteousness, and then he defines what that is, helping the widow and the orphan and doing good and repaying for the wickedness that he did, repaying what he stole. And he said, none of his wickedness will be remembered. Well, doesn't he have to kill a goat on the day of Yom Kippur? Doesn't he have to ask Jesus into his heart? That's not what he says. But he says, and then the righteous man, if a guy does righteousness, he'll live. But if the righteous man does righteousness for many, many years, and then he starts doing wickedness, none of his righteousness will be remembered. And he'll die because of his wickedness. Can't he just say, please forgive me? Well, if he doesn't repent, but he said it's almost like what he's saying, what you end up doing in your life. You never know when your life is going to end, but if you end up doing wickedness, you're dead. If you end up doing righteousness, you'll live. What about belief? What about repenting and asking? He didn't even talk about that. How does it all fit in? He made known, verse 11, he made known as a tonic, the man who does what I say, keeping my het kuf will live. Well, then why are we told modern times that it's not about what you do and what you don't do? Yes, it is what it's about. Well, no, it's not about that. It's what you believe. Well, it's not just what you believe. It's what you believe by what you do. And if you do righteousness, you'll live. That's what he said. Righteousness, Zadikah, comes with victory, deliverance, and salvation. That's the way it's built. That's Ben. Do you understand the building, Bet, and Nun? What makes it work? Bet Nun Hey is the building, the act of building and construction. Adam, I will do similarly. I will do according to what you have done because that's the way it's built. Ben Adam, son of man. If you say son of man, you lose the whole thing. I'm just saying that by this task of investigating the language, there's a lot to it. And then verse 10, Gam, also Shabbat. Ani Yahweh, Mikdashem. So the word Mikdash, Mem Kuf Dalet Shin, well, Mem is the place of, or the one who, Kuf Dalet Shin, then the Mem suffix means them, but Mem Kuf Dalet, it means to drill, or it's a point of focus, like the center of a bullseye. The bullseye is my day. Yeah, we're going to change it because, thank you, Mr. Constantine, to prove that our human voice has more authoritative than the written scripture or the voice of Elohim, we're going to change the day. Instead of the seventh day, we'll make it the first, and then we'll call it the seventh. You know what's going on? Can you see it? Can you see what's going on in history? Verse 13, my people rebelled, they didn't walk, they rejected and despised, they madly profaned and violated and mouthed off. And so according to the terms of the debar, the stipulations, according to the legal contract, we're finished. That's what the words mean. According to the terms of the stipulations, there is no more relationship between Yahweh and Israel. Israel canceled the contract, the covenant. Verse 14, but because of my name and reputation, and then there's this word, Het Lamed Hei, that if you look that up, or Hei Het Lamed, that's the word that means sweet or rusty, but just that word, Hei Het Lamed, also means application of the law. Application of the law. So if you think, well, in the new era, after the 2,000 years ago, there's no more law. No, that's not true. The application of the law is that either you get Het Lamed, sweet, pleasant challah, or you get rusty, sick, corroded. Israel is yet and still under the terms of this relationship. So for the last 2,000 years, 3,000 since the days of David, for Israel to be hated, despised, chased, plagued, pillaged by its enemies, those are the terms and stipulations of the contract. That's just the way it works. Doesn't mean the law is over. It means just that's the way it works. And then you go to verse 15, and he reaffirms his original oath, just like verse 6. And verse 16, Yod Ayin Nun, therefore, but it means to respond with a concern, obsession, Ayin Nun Hey. But they abhorred his chok, they would not halakah, they profaned Het Lamed Lamed, the Shabbat, and their heart shines for their idols. That's the four problems. So those four things they put into their side of the scales of balance, and what we get is like the last couple thousand years of world history, and it's our own fault. Real quick, I have a question. Kurt, it looks like we're at 2 hours. Does that mean we're at the end here, or how many minutes do we have left? Kurt? You there? Guess not. Well, I'll keep going a little bit longer, but we're getting near the end here. Verse 17 is pretty interesting. He says, my eye over them, and that's where Ayin Lamed Yod is Ali. My eye over them is abhorred. Yahweh said, look, if you're my people and I'm your Elohim, I'm going to watch over you. But because his people so loathed and abhorred his eye over them, 2 minutes, that it changes. So if you look at verse 17, we'll have to do some more of this next week, if you don't mind. It says, Vav, verse 17, Vav Tav He Samek, that's reject, abhor, and loathe. Aini, my eye, Ayin Lamed Yod Hei Mem, over them, Mem Shin Chet Tav Mem. Well, that's the word Mashiach. Mem Shin Yod has Mashiach. This is Mashak Tam. Mashak, Shin Het He is swimmer. But Shin Het, like a swimmer, you put your head down and you go to swim, downcast eyes. And lo, Ashiti Otam Kala Bamidbar. So it's like, because they rejected my eyes watching over them for good and taking pleasure in them, he's not going to do their oath because they wouldn't do their oath. So he's not going to protect them. And his eyes of being overlooking them will be now downcast eyes, like eyes of fury and venom. According to the term of the language, the word for bride, kala, Kaf Lamed Hey, which means all of me is now all of you, all of yours. Allah also means annihilated. Again, it's the reciprocal action. If we don't want his eyes over us, his eyes are still going to be over us, but instead of favor, instead of kindness and goodness and loving kindness of chesed, it's going to be downcast eyes of fury and anger. And then verse 18, he says, so that generation died off, and I said to their children, I'll make you the same deal. Guard, verse 19, guard and do, Aleph, Vav, Tav, Mem. The oath, the terms of our balanced scales of agreement. And also, verse 20, you got to keep the Shabbat, because that's the proof that you are recognizing Yahweh is your Elohim. And verse 21, and that whole generation rebelled, would not walk, would not shamar, and they profaned the Shabbat, just like their fathers. No, we're just not going to do it. Verse 22, the Shabbat, I am provoked to have my name considered as Aleph, Vav, Tav, Mem. He's so linked his identity to the Shabbat. And when I was a kid and going to the Presbyterian church and Baptist school, it was like them SDAs and JWs are just a cult of idiots. Idiot meaning they don't understand. They've made up some legal blah, blah about his name and his day. No, it was the Presbyterian and Baptist that were the cult of idiots. Don't understand about his name and his day. And then verse 23, I'm going to scatter, pezadi, explode, detonate, scatter into the lands of their enemies. Reason, verse 24, mishfat. It's always the balancing of scales. Verse 25, so I give them bad laws that they couldn't live by. Scattered in the lands of our enemies. Verse 26, plugged up, clogged pipe, their Aleph Vav Tav hidden, they have discharged comfort. The people of Israel, Yahuwah's people, Israel, have discharged their own rachem, and they don't even know Ani Yahweh. Verse 27, it's always this. You revile my oath with Mem Ayin Lamed. You revile our agreement by going up to the trees and the hills and worshiping other deities. That's verse 28. Verse 29, you call this a sacred place? We talked about that. Verse 30, the same amusement of your fathers is your rejection, your vow of Zioning. Verse 31, you have destroyed your status. We've got to quit. You have destroyed your status of Hebrew by throwing your children into the fire. You can't speak to me. Verse 32, the concept of Aliyah cannot coexist with rebellion. What does exist is angst. And like a scab, you've joined yourselves to the goyim and their idols of wood and stone. So this idea of us returning to Shabbat through Yahuwah's language, returning to the Moedim, is like pulling a scab off, but we're the scab that's been attached to the goyim scattered amongst the nations. Of course it's painful. Rip yourself off from the culture of our enemies who don't know him because they don't worship him. The only way to worship him is in spirit and truth. The Sabbath day, the Moedim, listening to his words and walking in his ways with a fond heart towards his true identity. And that we can do. We'll have to pick this up next week with verse 33. Carla, are you pushing the button? Are you
I'm supposed to, but could you do it, please?
Okay, Abba Yahweh, we're your people listening to your voice, wanting to walk in your ways. We've got misunderstanding of calendars and of meanings of words, and we want to honor Yeshua because we know he comes from you. We've just been told all kinds of stuff, so please cleanse our hearts, clarify our understanding, accept the token of our fondness for you by the fact that we'll sit down in Shabbat and try to walk in your Moedim and loving your name and your words and who you are as you've told us you are. As we alienate ourselves from our existing culture and history, which is obviously not you, to seek your face. We're your people, and we love you.